So rude. Hey, what's up? It's your girl, Chris Alicia, aka Chris, and welcome back to my channel. So today we are doing a booktube classic. We are doing a what's on my shelves bookshelf tour. So before we get into it, just a reminder, I try not to buy books if I don't need to. So if I do purchase a book, it is more than likely an absolute favorite, something I knew I needed on my shelves, or it is something that was recommended so highly, and after looking into it a little bit more, I found out it was just my style. So without further ado, welcome to my shelves. This is just the top of my shelf. There's some fake plants for ambiance, a giraffe up here that I got gifted. It is my favorite animal ever. I love me some giraffes. Like, I will literally ugly cry. And then this over here, I'm trying to get on my creativity kick with mixed results, but this is the first thing I ever punch needled. So I know it's not perfect, but I just wanted to keep it up as a reminder to keep trying new things, which you can see this little, we're gonna call it a bookmark. So truth be told, I am trying to learn how to crochet. All I can really do is chain. So at some point I want to learn how to make crocheted bookmarks. Considering making that a video idea, crocheting a bookmark. So stay tuned if that's something you're into. So this shelf is of books that I've already read. I've bought some of these fairly recently actually. So if you haven't already seen the book haul video I posted last week, go ahead and tune into that to kind of hear the behind the scenes of those. But these are the books that I've already read and wanted to keep in my personal collection. And then over here is a little giraffe mug that I got for my birthday a couple years ago. I don't drink out of it. It's honestly just for aesthetics, but there's also a little cute giraffe inside. So I thought it was a perfect accessory for a little bookend since this is not completely filled yet. This shelf is comprised of library books. I don't want them mixed in with the books I own because I don't want to keep a library book forever. I heavily utilize the library. The first time going to the public library here, one of the workers told me that we can check out up to 50 books. And in my head, I was like, ooh, that was a mistake to tell me because I'm a mood reader. So a lot of these have been on my shelves for a while. I do want to get to them at some point, but just trying to find the right mood, the right challenge to read them with. Then over here are also books that I have not yet read. On the right side, we have manga. Most of them have been checked out of the library. And then on the left side are books that I already own, some that I'm currently reading right now. And then this last shelf right here is comprised of books that I want to read at some point, but they're just not necessarily a top priority. And then on the right-hand side, you will see some embroidery thread, some embroidery needles. I've done some embroidery. That's another art form that I'm trying to get into. So, I mean, if you have any pointers, let me know. I do want to make a couple videos embroidering things that are book inspired, just because that's the kind of art I want to have around my own personal space. So again, if that's something you're interested in, I will probably be making some videos about that. And then over there, it's just some canvas bags and canvas, again for embroidery, some paper in the back that I use when I paint. Over here, we have a little kid's pottery studio. I really wanted to get into learning pottery, and the review said that this was a good one that you can have in the house. So we'll see if that ends up happening. Then we have my little crochet kit, a little beginner's crochet kit. At the bottom, it is a candle making set. So as you can see, I have a lot of aspirations to being creative, so let's see if I follow through with any of them. So as far as books I own and read, this right here is the pile. I'm not going to pick them all up because they will tumble over, so we're not going to do that. But the first one we have here is Dear Evan Hansen, the novel by Val Emick, Stephen Levinson, and Benj Pasek and Justin Paul, who are the creators of the show itself. I really loved the musical, so I picked up the book. I haven't seen the movie yet. I don't know if I'm going to, but I picked up the book and I actually really enjoyed it because you get more of Connor Murphy's perspective, which you don't get in the musical. But when I bought the book, this was when I was still buying books off of Amazon. I'm not anymore, but I wrote a little note to myself. Dear Crystal, today is going to be a good day and here's why. Sincerely me. If you've seen the musical, obviously you get the reference. And then here is a ticket from the first time I went. I used it as a bookmark when I read this. Next up is a recent purchase, but a book I read last year, Dominicana by Angie Cruz, Really loved this. Absolutely love the cover. Got this off of Pango Books, and I really enjoyed it just because it reminded me of like a story that one of my aunts would tell me about, like their journey to the US from DR. So kept this, something I definitely want to read again. And that's kind of the trend you're going to see among the books that I do have that I've already read or have recently purchased. I am only trying to keep books that I want to read again or that were gifted to me and have some sort of sentimental value. Otherwise, I have a box of about 30 books set to the side that used to be on my shelves that I took off because I knew I was never going to read them, or I read it and it wasn't like my type of book, or I thought someone else would enjoy it more than I did. So I went ahead and have them set to the side. If you're interested in any of those books, they are listed in Pango Books, so go ahead and buy one if you'd like. I feel like most of them I set to really cheap prices just because I don't want them anymore. And I'd rather try to give them to people that want those books. And then whatever's not sold there, I'm just going to go ahead and donate them to the library just so, again, it can be out of my house, but also in the hands of someone who actually wants to read it. Next up, we have Don't Ask Me Where I'm From by Jennifer De Leon. This was a book club pick for the Latinx faculty and staff group at my job. We read this and just had some really good discussion about it. I was personally interested in this because she is a Latina who is mixed with two different ethnicities, one of them being Guatemalan. I'm also half Guatemalan. So just, it's fun seeing that representation in a book. It's not something that I see a lot. Usually when I read books about people from Latin America, it's either from like the Caribbean, like DR, Puerto Rico, or Cuba, or Mexican. So definitely trying to pick up some more Latinx literature that is not necessarily from just those perspectives, and trying to get a variety of perspectives from Latin America. Also, yes, I did just clean up my glasses. They were getting gross. I was outside earlier and the outside got them. Another recent purchase, a book I read earlier this year, absolutely loved it, so I needed it in my personal collection. For Brown Girls with Sharp Edges and Tender Hearts, A Love Letter to Women of Color by Prisca Dorques Mojica Rodriguez. Absolutely adored this book. This is one of the few nonfiction books I read this year that I'm just like, I want to read this again and again and again and again. So bought it so that I could have it in my personal library, something that I probably want to read again. So you're going to hear me talk more and more about this. Next up is a book that I actually bought years ago and I read years ago, Highly Illogical Behavior by John Corey Whaley. I know it's about mental health. I can't tell you anything else, but I know I really enjoyed it. So I kept it on my shelves because I wanted to give it another read, see if I still feel the same way about it that I did before. I remember it being really interesting, like the voice of the characters. It's just not coming out to me, but I definitely want to give it another read. Another recent pickup I got from Pango Books, The House in the Cerulean Sea by DJ Clune. I loved this book. I'm not a fantasy girl, and I loved this. I think it's actually this book that taught me that I really enjoy the found family trope. It is just so wholesome. I was reading this probably at 4 a.m. in the morning just crying. It is so good. If you haven't read this before, like, please do. It's so good. It's so good. I have heard mixed reviews about his other books, but we're not talking about those. This one is good, and that's all you need to know. Another recent pickup, I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter by Erica L. Sanchez. When I say I felt seen reading this, I felt seen. I still read YA, like you can see the other books on the back. A lot of them are YA. A lot of times the characters annoy me, but the messaging and the storylines in the books, they just hit in a way that you might not expect. I think the other thing is, like, usually these books takes place and they're like high schoolers, and I'm like, high schoolers are annoying. You were annoying when you were 13 to 17. Like, I know I was annoying between the ages of 13 to 17. And these are just books that I didn't grow up with. Like, this was not readily available. This was not out there. And like, we already know that in mainstream publishing industry, they already don't promote BIPOC authors and BIPOC stories like they should. So when I can read them, especially ones that I feel like would relate to my lived experience, I'll pick them up and I'll read them. That is going to be a trend you see across all these other books. I mainly read from BIPOC authors. That's not going to change if you have an issue with that. There's so many other channels on BookTube you could be watching. So I Want to Eat Your Pancreas by Yoroso Mino. Love this. This was a gifted book to me by my husband. Really rough name, really beautiful story. It is described as a bittersweet romance, which it is, but this is such a good book, and it talks about health, how you deal with your health, not just your mental health, but your physical health and your outlook on life when you are dealing with like a terminal illness from the high school perspective. Loved this, want to read this again. I know there's a movie that's based off of this that I haven't been able to find, but I definitely want to watch it soon. Know My Name by Chanel Miller, one of the best books I ever read. I don't read a ton of nonfiction, but this is a kind of nonfiction. This is a kind of memoir that I need and want in my life. If you don't know who Chanel Miller is, she was a survivor of the Stanford swimmer case. We're not going to say his name because fuck that guy, but it's a really dope story. You get to hear about the case and the experience from her perspective, but also just learn about her everyday life and how she dealt with everything, how she coped with everything, how she found herself after the case and found her passion in comedy and everything. And such a good memoir, such a good memoir. Very hard read just because of the nature of the story, but so good. Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. Lily has my heart. I love this. I love this. I love this. I don't like historical fiction, but maybe I do. This book made me second guess that. It's so good. It is about like this high schooler struggling with her sexuality and trying to figure out what her sexuality actually is. And she hears about this club called the Telegraph Club where they have male impersonators. She finally gets to go one day with this other girl, Kath, and just experiences like lesbian and queer culture for the first time. She is Chinese American, and most of the people around her are typically white women. So there are a lot of like comments and like racism that happen in there. There's a lot of like China doll rhetoric, so annoying, important to get through, but the book itself was really, really good. I'm gonna thank this book for single-handedly getting me back into wanting to read graphic novels. This is The Magic Fish by Trung Lee Wen, and it follows 3 different storylines. The first one being about this 13-year-old boy who's gay and is struggling with telling his parents the truth about his sexuality. One of the other storylines follows his mother and her grappling with having to go back to Vietnam after leaving for so long because of some family stuff. And then the last storyline is following like fairy tales and how all those stories kind of parallel each other, but like super vibrant colors, really beautiful art. Loved this. It made me cry. I think I'm starting to base books off of how likely they are to make me cry, and this one made me cry a lot in like the last 5 pages. But if you haven't read this and you like graphic novels, if you want to read more about teenage queer experience coming out to your parents and still be very wholesome vibes, I would 10 out of 10 recommend this. So this is No Land to Light On by Yara Zigub. I read this for a podcast that my friend hosts earlier this year, and I did not expect to love this as much as I did, but bro, the writing, like literary gold. It takes place in Trump era 2017 when the travel ban was in place. So it is a story about a wife being separated from her husband while she is 5 months pregnant and he gets deported. It is a tragic book. It's heartbreaking, but the writing is so good. It's so good. And I think especially because so much was happening in that time, like a lot of people were just like numb to the news. And I knew I was. It was just an eye-opening book to just hear like one person's story or like one example of a story of what was taking place during that time. Beautifully written. Can't believe this is a debut because this author's writing is just immaculate. Next up, we have Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl Gonzalez. I read this for a book club with my sorority and she sent a little video and it was so cute. Love this book. Absolutely adored this book. There were so many characters in this book that I absolutely hated and so many others that I'm like, oh, you're the best, but super topical still today. It's about a lot of things like the Latin identity here in the United States, specifically for Puerto Ricans who are in this weird in-between of like we want to be our own country, but we're US citizens, but we don't get the perks of being a US citizen. Like it's really interesting story. I fucking hate the mom as a mother, but as a person, she's actually really dope, which is a really interesting thing to try to dissect. Characters are really, really interesting. They're super developed. I've learned I like reading about characters who are older. I believe Olga is either in her late 30s or early 40s, but she's kind of already, like, she's already lived a lot of life. It's not from like the perspective of a teenager where they'll make a lot of mistakes and you're just there like pulling your hair out, like, why are you doing this stupid thing? And it's like, oh, because you're a teenager. And not saying like teenagers only do stupid things, but I think specifically like in YA, you'll see things that a character will do and you're just like, what was the common sense in that? But yeah, this is like one of the first adult books that I've read recently and absolutely adored it. 10 out of 10 would recommend. I said all this stuff about YA, but you know what? This book did it right. I love it. This is my favorite book of all time. This is Radio Silence by Alice Osman. I know Alice Osman's name is everywhere right now because of Heartstopper. I would say that Heartstopper is her second best piece of work because this is the first. I loved this book. Frances is me. I am Frances. This is just such a good book in terms of like talking about the importance of friendship, platonic friendship. It kind of touches on like fandom culture, but that's like not really the main purpose of it. I think this book really did it for me because we have this student who is like meant to be this perfect person, but in reality, she just wants to like vibe. Like she's a big fan of this podcast and does fan art for it. And that's like kind of how the story starts off. Like the podcast is called University, which honestly took me way too long to understand. I think what really did it for me with this book specifically is just like, there's like this understanding that the characters finally get to that like, you don't need to go to university or to college to be successful. And like, I know that that's a story that gets shoved down our throats at an early age, but school truly isn't everything. There are plenty of successful people that didn't go to school, but also like school can be a major point of stress and distress, and it can be a lot more harmful for you than it can be beneficial, and really trying to figure out what's best for you in that situation. Love this book. Perfect book. I specifically got this cover because I'm obsessed with this cover. Like, oh, gorgeous. Thank you, Book Depository. Next up, we actually have two books that my husband purchased for me. One is A Short History of the Girl Next Door by Jared Dirac. I cannot remember what this book is about, but I do remember liking it. So I kept it obviously for sentimental reasons, but also because I do want to give it another read. I've seen this come up as like a favorite book for other people that I've watched on BookTube. So want to give it another read to see if it's still a book that I'm like, yep, this is up there. This is a good book. And then We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. I love this cover. I remembered not loving this book, but I want to give it a second chance. Not only was it a gift, but I think there was parts of the book that I should have liked. And I don't know if I was just like not in the right headspace. I don't know if like I was in a bit of a reading slump because it also did take me a really long time to get through this. So I'm going to give it another chance. See if this is a book that I actually do really enjoy, because honestly, this cover is way too beautiful for the book to not be good. So here's to a second chance. Next up is The Wicker King by Kay Ancrum. The chokehold this book has me by, oh my God. I read this and I think about this book at least twice a day. Like I'm seriously contemplating getting a tattoo of something that's scribbled on here. Like maybe the crown right there. I think that's what I'm thinking. But love this, like the way, bye-bye. The way it's told, like you can see the deterioration in just the pages. I am obsessed with this book. Like, I need everyone to read this. It's like one of my favorite books that I read this year. It's super easy to get through because like the chapters are a page or two, but it's so easy to get engrossed in the story. This is a contemporary novel. There are like some fantastical ish elements that are brought on by like mental distortions. So it is not a fantasy book. Like I know when I read reviews or when I heard people talk about it, they were like, oh, I thought it was a fantasy. So this isn't what I wanted. I'm like, nah, B. It says it in the thing that it is a contemporary novel. When you read about what it is, it says it's a contemporary novel. The author says it is a contemporary novel. Read this. Hella dark. Make sure you're in a good headspace for it. So good. So good. I'm not going to tell you anything about the book. It's so good. And then last but not least, for books I've read and own and will keep forever, With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. If you don't know who Elizabeth Acevedo is, you must be living under a rock. Like, I have to be convinced. But I read this book a couple years ago, absolutely loved it. Love the main character's voice. The book is beautiful on the outside, but also on the inside. So definitely another book that it's been a while since I read, so I want to pick it up again. It is about a teenage mother who really loves cooking and wants to maybe do some cooking professionally. That could be the worst wrap up of what this book is about. It's been so long since I read it. And like I mentioned before, one thing about me, I'm going to forget. So I will read this again at some point and give you my updated thoughts. Okay, so this part is going to go a little bit quicker because I actually have not read any of these books. So first up, we have Ace, What Asexuality Reveals About Desire, Society, and the Meaning of Sex by Angela Chen. It is a nonfiction book about what the title says, asexuality, and what desire and sexuality mean. We have Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Iamide. I think this is like a mystery, question mark? I don't know. I've heard it's fantastic, so I definitely want to read this soon. An Afro-Indigenous History of the United States by Kyle T. Mays. I have not read a ton of books about Indigenous culture. I read one, which the book isn't up there because I lent it out to one of my students, but it's Firekeeper's Daughter. Fantastic book. Absolutely loved it. Will read it again, but want to go ahead and read this to get more context about the Indigenous experience, but specifically the Afro-Indigenous experience. After Parties, Stories by Anthony Biasna. So I'm reading this for Asian Readathon. I know it's June. I read books when I want. I'm so excited to read this one. Next up is The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. I think this is like magical realism, so a little bit outside of my typical reading genre, but still excited to read this. I've heard great things. Black Girls Must Be Magic by Jane Allen. I read the first one earlier this year. Love seeing more like visibility about characters with infertility issues, especially since I'm someone that has infertility issues. So excited to read this one when I have a chance. It's definitely on like my more priority-ish list. It just doesn't really fit in with any of the other challenges I'm doing right now. So trying to find a time to pick this up. Black Nerd Problems by William Evans and Omar Hallman. I'm not a black nerd, but I am a nerd in general. So wanting to read about different experiences. I know they talk about like Marvel. I think they talk about like manga and anime culture, and I love my manga and anime. So excited to give that a read. Breast and Eggs by Miyako Kawakami. This is also on my list for Asian Readathon. So excited to give this a read. Gotta say I'm a little intimidated because there's no spacing in it. She's a thick boy. But gonna get through this soon, and you will see this in a video. You can call me a liar if that video never comes out, but it will. So you won't be able to. Breathe and Count Back from 10 by Natalia Sylvester. I don't know what this is about, but I know there's disability rep. I can't remember what disability it is right now, but I'm really excited to read this one too. Very pretty cover. I will pick up any book that has a pretty cover. It's a problem. And that's honestly how we got to this point, but that's okay. Next up, we have Disfigured on Fairy Tales, Disability, and Making Space by Amanda LeDuc. Trying to diversify my reading more outside of just, racial and ethnic diversity, reading more about disability and ableism, trying to get some better understanding around that and kind of read from more experiences. So excited about this. I'm not really into fairy tales, so kind of seeing how those two things play together. I'm more interested in this because of the disability than the fairy tales, if that makes sense. But I'm hoping that the combination of those two will make me like it, similarly to how Magic Fish made me like the fairy tale stories, even though I thought that was like the weakest part to me. And in saying that, like, none of them were weak parts. It was a fantastic book. That was just the part that I was the least interested in. Ghost Squad by Claribel A. Ortega. I've actually read this already. I need to return this back to the library. This is so wholesome. I don't read a lot of middle grade, but this was so good. It really brings me back to like my Goosebumps Fear Street roots, which is a lot of the reading I did when I was younger. It's like a mystery type story where she's trying to figure out like these ghosts are taking over the town that she lives in now because she accidentally like awoke these spirits, trying to strengthen the tie she has to her grandma and her family's spiritual connections. Because I didn't say this at the beginning, but she can see her ancestors' ghosts and like talk to them and communicate with them. So she's trying to figure out how she can strengthen that again because her grandma's light was kind of dimming. Next up, we have Honor by Thriti Umargar. I've heard great things, but I don't know what this is about. I think it's about an Indian American journalist that goes back to India to do a story about traditions that they have there, ? I've heard fantastic things, so I want to read it. As you can see, I don't know anything about the books that I pick up. I'm just like, I've heard this is good, and this is in the genres that I enjoy. I'm gonna pick it up and hope for the best. Like, I know I read what the description was literally ages ago, but I try to put enough space in between that I forget the description, because sometimes the description spoils things for me. I want to go into the experience feeling like I have no idea what's happening, because I usually have no idea what's happening. And it's fantastic. Best way to read. Next up, we have a classic that I have never read, but it's The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cineros. Couldn't tell you what this is about, but it should be a quick little read. I feel like specifically every Latina has read this except me, so I need to catch up, but excited to read this one. This is a fairly new book, so I'm glad that they had it in the library already. It is Just Your Local Bisexual Disaster by Andrea Mosqueda. I saw people talking about it and I liked the cover. I'll let you know what I think at some point. We have The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. I'm actually like a third of the way through this book. I just put it up on the shelf because then I would forget that I have it and not include it in this. But I'm really liking this so far. This is a trippy little book. Like, people just disappear things and you're just like, what does that mean? Like, the memory police will be like, today we're disappearing birds. And you have to get rid of everything that you have that has birds. Once something has disappeared, like, it's hard to recall what it is. You no longer have like the attachment to that. And like, there's no physical reminders of what it's weird, but I'm liking this. Again, I don't like fantasy or science fiction, but I'm eating this up. This is fantastic. Can't wait to keep reading. I'm actually gonna put this on the side so I can read this again in a little bit. We Are Not Free by Tracy Chi. This is like first generation Japanese immigrants, I believe, or at least one of the characters is. I don't know what this is about, but I've heard it's great. I want to say this is like historical fiction. This is historical fiction because the first thing I saw is Following the Day After Pearl Harbor. Whew, I don't like war books. We'll see how this goes. We Are Not From Here by Jenny Torres Sanchez. This is about Guatemalan teen. Ooh, those are on my library slips. This is about, I believe, 3 Guatemalan teenagers crossing the borders between Guatemala and Mexico, and then Mexico and the United States, I believe. Excited to read this. I have to imagine it's going to be a harder read, so I think I've been putting it off a little bit, but definitely something that I've had my eye on for a really long time and can't wait to read about. So rude. This is When You Were Everything by Ashley Woodfolk. I think this is about friendship. There's a reason I wanted to pick this up. Someone was talking about it and I was into it. I really enjoy books about friendship. I don't like romance. Like, even the books that I've listed out to you, like, most of them are not romance based. I hate romance books. And we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But like, I can't stand romance books. They're just so cringy to me. Like, there's very few romance books that I've read that I'm just like, oh, this is everything. I say as I have a romance manga right here. I like romance manga, but I don't like romance books, if that makes sense. We'll delve into this because there's a lot that I also don't like about romance manga. Romance just isn't my thing. Like, no disrespect to people that like it. I just know my taste and it's not there for me. I say as I also have like Last Night at the Telegraph Club up there as one of the best books I've read. It's fine. Don't even worry about it. Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed, which is 15 short stories, and it is edited by Sarasia J. Fennell. I've heard fantastic things about this. And then even like looking at the back, Elizabeth Acevedo has an essay in here. I don't immediately recognize any of the other authors, but the editor also has a story in here. So excited to give this a read as well. I've heard amazing things. And then last but not least, another book by Sandra Cineros, Women Hollering Creek and Other Stories. So I think this is like a compilation of like short stories. So excited to read this one as well. Those are all the books that I currently have checked out of the library, excluding manga, because that's its own beast, but we'll get to that next. This shelf is going to be done a little bit different just because of how things are laid out. So I'm actually going to start with the manga series. I have all 13 volumes of Aoharu Ride by Io Sakazaki checked out right now. I'm actually currently 9 volumes in. I love this story so much. I love it. Like, there's some things that happen and it pisses me off, but I love this series. It's so good. The covers kind of change after a specific point in time. And like, I'm obsessed with how saturated like the later, like, look at that. I'm obsessed with how saturated the later volumes get. Like, it's just so good. It's so good. It's so good. This is probably going to be the Manga Monday video I do for next month, or realistically whenever I finish reading all of them. And for all I know, this video is going to be posted after I do a Manga Monday of these. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Really enjoying it so far. I read this when I wake up to just start off my day in a good mood, and it's been working. Next up is the Your Name series by Mikado Shinkai. I have never watched the movie, but I've heard it's fantastic. So I wanted to read the manga before watching the movie. One of my favorite anime movies is A Silent Voice, and I've heard that like the manga is so much better. And I read the manga, and I don't know if it's just because I read it digitally that I still preferred the movie over it. But I want to give this a chance first, get my impressions, and then read and then watch the movie and see how that works out. I think I do want to check out the physical copies of A Silent Voice to just see how that impacts my experience with reading it and see if that changes anything. I feel like usually it doesn't. Usually I'll read it and then not care to watch it. Like that's kind of where I am with My Hero right now. So hopefully it doesn't happen with this. I feel like it won't, but we'll see. Next, we have the Our Dream at Dusk series by Shimanami Tasugare. I already did my Manga Monday about this, but I will tell you again. I love this series so much. My hands are too small to do this. I love the series so much. It's so good. Really great queer literature that is not dependent on romance, which I feel like a lot of times when you get recommendations for queer manga, they all are romance based. And as someone who has repeatedly said, I don't really care for romance, but has 16 romance mangas sitting on my shelves, 17 of you count I Want to Eat Your Pancreas, I sound like a liar, but honestly, my point still stands. Next, it is The Promised Neverland by Kaiju Shirai. I only checked out the first one because I actually have the Shonen Jump app. So I picked, this is going to sound really silly. I picked this up for a video I'm recording. I wanted to have a physical representation of the manga just so I had something to refer to. So that is why there's only one on my shelves and not all 20. Which, I mean, technically I could have done that, but that just seems really excessive, especially if I'm literally already paying for the app. So not going to do that. Next, we have Volume 1 of Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. I haven't read this yet. This is also a gift from my husband, and the only reason I haven't read this yet is because I prefer reading completed manga series, and it looks like this one is not done yet. But I believe it is a horror manga, which is usually like not what I lean to. I say, as I'm saying, I'm reading the entire 20 volumes of A Promised Neverland, but I think I want to give this a shot soon to see how I feel about it. And if I like it, I'll pick up the other volumes as they come out and read it that way. So we'll see how I feel about this. But I know my husband read it and he really liked it. So regardless, I'll probably be picking up the other volumes from the library. And the rest of the stack are books that are in my more immediate TBR list. So we have Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. I picked this up because I was told if you liked radio silence, you would enjoy this. And I kind of wanted to gauge why. I didn't know if it was just because there's like some fandom elements, which, I mean, I liked radio silence, but it wasn't for the fandom. It was more for the friendship storylines. Well, a love letter to fandom, friendship, and stories that shape us. Based off the tagline, I'm more inclined to read it and enjoy it. It also talks a little bit about mental health as well. And that's something that is a lot more up my alley. So excited to give this a try, especially since it's such a thick book. But like the writing isn't too bad. So we should be good. I believe in me. It should be okay. It should be okay. You'll see tabs, and that's because I started reading this and then I stopped reading this. But I'm going to finish it soon. But it is The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonia Renee Taylor. From what I started reading, I really enjoyed it, so I am actually really excited to pick it up again and kind of get through it. You Sound Like a White Girl, The Case for Rejecting Assimilation by Julissa Arce. I ordered this book literally on January 1st when I first heard about it, and I got a pre-order from Café con Libros, so I have been waiting to pick this up. I just have not been in a nonfiction mood, which sucks, but I'm really excited to read this. This is actually the book club pick for my sorority for next month, so I'm gonna give it a read. Take all the notes. It's not like a really thick book, which is helpful. But from what I did, I read like maybe the first couple pages and I liked it so far. And I think this being something I heard my entire life growing up, it resonated a little too deep for me. But we'll see what this ends up being about. Next up is The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk, MD. I started reading this and it is a dense book. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I actually picked up a couple of like workbooks to go along with it to help me get through it so that I'm able to read it and actually retain the content of what it's saying. So I am excited to get through this book. It's gonna be a book that takes a while, and that's fine. But I'm excited to finally get through that when I have time to finally get through that. Next up is The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina. This will slowly be moved up there because I'm trying to read this by the end of the month for a book challenge. I started reading it and I think I liked it. There's like fantasy magic elements, which is not my usual thing, but willing to give this a try. Hopefully I enjoy it. I bought this, so I hope I enjoy it, but if not, I'm sure I can also find someone who would enjoy it much more than I did and gift it to them that way. This is a book that was recently gifted to me. It is Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. This is a book I've heard about for literal years. I'm so glad that it's finally in my possession. Can't wait to read about it. Hopefully it'll help me be a more productive member of society, but we'll see. The Power of Dignity, How Transforming Justice Can Heal Our Communities by Judge Victoria Pratt. This is a book that I was gifted from Seal Press. This is released in early May, so a little behind, but definitely want to give this a read. This is a very nonfiction heavy stack. It's because I want to read a ton of nonfiction. It's just sometimes I don't have the capacity for it, which sucks. This is Sex Up, How Society Sexualizes Us and How We Can Fight Back by Julia Serrano. I'm about halfway through this book and I've really been liking it. I just took a little bit of a break, but it talks about sexuality and sexualization from the perspective of a trans woman who transitioned as an adult. So she talks about sexualization from the lens of someone who was male presenting and fully presents as a woman. So really interesting book, really interesting perspective. You'll get more information once I actually finish it. And then last but not least, we're on our final row. You can't see it just because of where things are laid out, but this last row are books that I really want to read at some point. So I didn't put them in my like donation or to sell box because I do still want to read them and have genuine interest in them. It's just not something that I'm prioritizing over other books. Something that I know is really going to catch my attention, or something for a book club, or something for a challenge that I'm trying to finish in a short amount of time. So these books will probably transition up once I start getting through these. First up, we have Being Lolita by Allison Wood. This is a memoir I picked up at like a random book sale that was happening on the sidewalk. I had just finished reading My Dark Vanessa probably like a couple weeks before, and they kept referencing the book Lolita. I don't really have a desire to read Lolita because it is from the perspective of like the abuser, and I don't want to do that, but I would be interested in reading the memoir of someone who went through something like that. At that same book sale, I saw this book called Dope World: Adventures in the Global Drug Trade by Nico Vorobrov. I don't know what this is about, but this is just a really trippy little cover. So I wanted to pick it up. It's another nonfiction book, but I'm excited to see what this says. This is a book sent to me by my sister-in-law, The Energy Alignment Method by Yvette Taylor. I'm a big energy person. Like if I don't like your energy, I'm just not gonna fuck with you. So I'm interested into reading more about energy alignment and what that means. It looks like it has like breathing techniques and understanding what energies mean and that type of stuff. So excited to read about that a little bit more. We have a couple of more like academic books. Latinx in Higher Education, Exploring Identity, Pathways and Success. I picked this up at a NASPA conference a couple years ago. I think I'm at my first NASPA conference in Philadelphia. So that would be like 2018. But I still want to give this a read. It's just, I know it's going to take me some time to get through, but I definitely still want to give this a read. My Beloved World by Sonia Sotomayor, who is a Supreme Court judge. She was the keynote speaker for, I don't know if it was that same NASPA conference or the one the year after. I think it was for that same NASPA conference, but I picked this up. She's like the first Latina, the Supreme Court justice, and she's from the Bronx, and I lived in the Bronx, and I have family in the Bronx. So just wanted to pick this up, get to hear her story from her own perspective. I don't remember how, and I don't remember where, but I got this at work a couple years ago. Sustaining Spirits, Self-Care for Social Justice by Naomi Ortiz. Definitely want to get through this. It looks like a lot of reflection questions, making sure that you're taking care of yourself while trying to fight for a cause and for others. So making sure that you're also okay during that process. This is another gift from my sister-in-law. So Untigering, Peaceful Parenting for the Deconstructing Tiger Parent by Iris Chen. I am not a parent at the moment, but I do want to read about like more gentle parenting, since I think that's something that's a lot more prevalent now than it was when I was a kid. So really excited to read about that. This is like a classic. I've seen this everywhere and I still have yet to get through it. So why are all the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria and other conversations about race, by Beverly Daniel Tatum, PhD. I still definitely want to get through this. I just know it's going to take me some time. So that's why I have it on my immediate TBR list. We kind of delve into some YA territory. So All in Pieces by Suzanne Young. I read the entire program series. So I saw she had this book out and I was like, I'll give it a whirl. I don't know if this is also like dystopian-esque, but I don't think it is. So I wanted to give it a chance for that reason. All Our Broken Pieces by L.D. Crichton. Couldn't tell you what this is about, but I know I read the synopsis when I was going through the books that I want to give away and keep, and the synopsis kept me intrigued enough that I wanted to keep it. So I plan on reading this by the end of the year for the Buzzword-a-thon by Books and Lala on Storygraph. So by the end of the year, you'll hear my thoughts. Amelia Westlake Was Never Here by Erin Goff. Couldn't tell you what this is about either, but kept it because the synopsis sounded interesting enough for me to keep in the library for a little bit longer. Caramelo by Sandra Cisneros. I want to read this. I don't know when I'm going to read this, but it'll happen soon. It's a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be, and the font is a lot smaller than I can handle right now. So, oops. Nine Perfect Strangers by Leanne Moriarty. I never saw Big Little Lies. I don't really care to, but maybe I will one day. Who knows? Have this on here. Gonna read it at some point. When? Couldn't tell you, but at some point. The Revised Fundamentals of Caregiving by Jonathan Evison. I watched the movie this was based on and fucking adored it. So I want to get through the book. It's just, again, the font is so small. It is just so small. So at some point I'll get to it. My eye hurts right now as it is, so it's just not going to be today, but at some point I will get through it. So What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. I have heard many mixed things about this. I usually don't like dual perspective by dual authors, so I think that's probably why I've been so hesitant to read it, but I do still want to read it at some point. And then 50 Words for Rain by Asha Lemmy. I think I was gifted this from like Penguin Random House. Yeah, when they were doing the Amplify Black Stories giveaway, where they picked 2021 readers, and I got it through there. Still have to read it. It's so thick, and I have a fear of big books, I'm learning, but I do want to get through this at some point, hopefully by the end of the year. I keep saying hopefully by the end of the year. There's no way I'm getting through all these books by the end of the year, but hopefully soon. It will be read soon. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you got some insight into my taste in books, things I like, authors I like, even though there's really not a lot of consistency in the authors I read. But yeah, hope you got something a little bit more about me through my shelves. Before I sign off, I just wanted to ask you all, hey y'all, what do you think about this? So as I mentioned, I'm kind of back in my manga bag, loving it here. It's fantastic. However, I've realized that there's just some tropes that I absolutely cannot stand. So an example of this is Aluharu Ride. There's a scene where, like, in order for a teenage boy to show a girl that you're like, hey, you can't just be this vulnerable around any other, like around any guy, like they can do something, or like you just can't trust guys. And they're just like, haha, like I can protect myself. And then they do something where they like basically like pin the girl against like a wall or the ground or something to teach them a lesson. And the girl's like, I understand. They're doing this to teach me something. Like they would never actually do something. Like, why the fuck? Why? Why is this a trope? Why is this something that happens? And I remember this ring light's really intense. I'm taking out my glasses. I don't need my glasses for this. I want you to see how I feel. But I remember this happening in Orin High School Host Club. And like, it's a beach scene where Haruhi like runs after these guys because they're like harassing these girls or something. And Kyoya's like, oh, you need to apologize to Tamaki because like he was like, whatever he said, he's basically like, right. Like you can't just, go out and about and do all these things. So, like you're a girl, like they're bigger than you. They can like do whatever. And Haruhi's like, bro, like I can fight my own battles. I get it. And Kyoya pins her to the bed to make it seem like, bro, like dudes can just take advantage of you like this. Do I understand that this happens in real life? Yes, I'm very aware that SA happens all the time in real life. It is a really fucked up thing and really fucked up situation, which is why it pisses me off so much when they do this, specifically in manga, specifically in shoujo manga. Like, I don't know why this is a trope. Like, dude needs to pretend that they're gonna assault you in order to teach you a lesson. I hate it. I will be loving a book or a story or an anime, and that happens, and I'm just like, I guess I have to pretend that this never happened because it's so fucking out of character. And it's just, it's such a, I hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much. I'm still going to read the rest of the series. I really enjoy this series. I'm like 9 volumes in and I really like it. There's just, I think it's just a thing with shoujo manga specifically that they just do this. And I'm just like, if you have shoujo manga recommendations where this just doesn't happen, please let me know. I hate it. It is one of my least favorite tropes. In books in general, another thing I hate is when something's classified as enemies to lovers and it's not enemies to lovers. They're just like, oh, I don't like this person. And then, like, a couple chapters in, they're already, like, quite literally in there. Like, I read Red, White, and Royal Blue recently, and this has such good reviews. I disliked this book for many reasons. It was not for me, and it just kind of solidified like maybe the romance genre is just not my thing. However, like, it's classified as enemies to lovers, and it's not enemies to lovers. Like, it's basically like a mild dislike to lovers. Like, don't call it enemies to lovers if it's not enemies to lovers. Like, I want the visceral hate. Like, I want you to see each other, and I need it to be mutual. Because I think that's the other thing. In that book, it was not mutual. Like, Alex kind of didn't like Henry. He's like, oh, he's so pretentious, whatever. But it was not a mutual dislike. I need that mutual dislike. And I need you to explain to me why this mutual dislike exists. And I need to believe that there is a mutual dislike. But this also has a couple things. Like, the reason they hate each other can't be like a super high stakes, like, there's no returning from this thing that occurred, because then that's also going to take me out. I'm just like, I would never fuck with this person again. No, you're quite literally dead to me. Like, no, I don't want to see that because it's going to just gross me out. Like, I don't want that. But I need I need it to be mutual. I need it to be actual enemies, and I need to believe it, because then it's going to make the build up to the romance better. I also want it to be kind of like a thing like, bro, are we hate fucking right now? Do I dislike you so much? Like, the sexual tension is just so high. Maybe that's what it is. You can give me that. That's fine. We'll get into that, sure. But I can't. If you're enemies, give me enemies. I realize I also really like rivals to lovers. And I feel like maybe I'm just not picking up the best books. I don't see that enough, but I also need the rivals to just like be not as high stakes, if that makes sense. Give me like we're both vying for captain of these teams, or we're from opposing schools and we've been rivals since childhood. Like, give me something like that. Like, if you lose this game, it can have real stakes, fine. Like, it can have actually, no, I lied. I don't like books with high stakes either. Like, I don't want that, especially in my romance. Like, I want it to be fluffy. I want it to be a good time. I don't want like this decision I'm gonna make is gonna impact me for the rest of my life in like a negative way. Like, if it is like a rivals, I can't even think of an example right now, but if it's like a rivals to lovers, like, give me like captains of competing schools. And I don't know, there's just been so much tension since you all were young, and it's built up to that because like you basically keep going back and forth and like, I'll win this game, but I'll win this game. Like, that's fine. Give me that. That sounds great. But like, I need, if there's gonna be rivals, if there's gonna be enemies, I need it to make sense. I need it to be believable. I need to be invested. And a lot of these stories that I read, I'm just not. If you have good recommendations of those things, drop them down below. But yeah, so what are just some tropes that you'll read them and you're just like, I'm taken out of the book. I don't want this anymore. Or you're just like, can you go to the trope graveyard, please? I realized before I was gonna start talking, a lot of the tropes I dislike are romance related. And that's just because I'm not a big romance reader. Anyway, what are some tropes that just like grind your gears? You're just like, oh, death to this trope forever and ever. I never want to think about it again or talk about it again. But instead of just keeping that and festering that hate inside your hearts, that's my pizza. I'm about to make a pizza right after I finish recording this. But like the tropes that just fester inside your heart, let them out in the comments below and share them, because I know you're not the only one. Just because I know I'm not the only one that hates these tropes with such deep, deep disdain. Please let me know. This is going to be a purging video. You're purging the negativity, the book negativity out of your hearts. Anyway, I feel like that just was a completely different energy than the rest of it, but that's fine. Thank you so much for watching this. Thank you so much for listening to me rant. Really appreciate it. If you liked this video, go ahead and leave a like. If you like this kind of content, which is like book content, book adjacent content. It's not always going to be about books, but it'll always be maybe slightly book adjacent. Go ahead and subscribe. I'm trying to post fairly regularly. If you like this, go ahead and check out the other videos that I've already posted. But thank you so much. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.